I'm afraid of what's going to happen when Donald Trump has a third term. And I haven't been answering them. So I'm going to give them and you the same answer at the same time. It is my belief that when it looks like Donald Trump will actually run for a third time, that violence will begin across America. That is the end of our democracy. And that will cause national violence.
Raised in a sophisticated kind of style. Yeah, my taste in music and women drove my folks hag wild. Dad had a plan for me. It was debutantes and symphonies. But I like my music hard, like my women wild. Yeah, I like my women just a little on the trashy side.
Good morning. Welcome to Pivot Point. I'm your host, Barry Sacro, and this is episode 22. Boy, I'm glad you're all out there listening, and today we're going to talk about family. And we're going to talk about family because I was with my grandchildren and thinking about that, and so this is what we're going to speak about, and that first song was a tribute to Melania, and that's about all I have to say, was that fine tribute. But let's talk about the family of the Trump family and see what's going on. Because as we get into this discussion over what comes in the future, the first thing we got to understand is how we've gotten here. And we get there from the Trump family. So let's talk about that a little bit. Again, I'm broadcasting from Space Ape Studios in Haines City at the Pivot Point. And we're here talking moderate politics. We are not looking to be extreme, but we will discuss what is the extreme as we go into this. We're not looking for it. We're looking for a moderate approach. So thank you for my dedication to Melania Trump. And now let's kind of get into it a little further, because as a grandparent, I always think, is this an appropriate thing to do? Am I teaching my grandchildren the right things? I have a bunch of grandchildren and great-grandchildren all here in the neighborhood. I get with them with some regularity. And my question is Grandpa doing the right thing? And that should be the question for any family, especially the first family, a family that we put into office, that we share our life with. Is this family behaving the way we want our families to do? Are our families behaving the way they are? And is that appropriate? So the first question, or the most important question for this week, is truth. And as we talk about the Trump family, truth is the element that's a little harder to find than most. And I don't want to pick on Donald Trump for his lack of truthfulness, because he has come from that kind of a family, and he has expanded it into his generations. This got to be what his plan is. Can't be anything else, because that's what he's showing everybody. I dedicated the song to Melania and all that, but everything in that family, in one way or another, is a lie, including how the president's wife comes to America. We've all seen the pictures of ICE and the courtrooms and the tear gas. She came with just an outright lie. She was invited on what's called a genius grant, and how they gave her that one must have been that they knew something. But I suspect money talks and bullshit walks, and so she just sailed right through. Nobody questioned what kind of education she has. And by the way, there is no college involved. And so we're looking at somebody who is not just not skilled, not just not aware of the culture, but not that smart. So, moving right along. But where did Donald Trump get his morality from? Donald Trump's dad was named Fred, and Fred Trump had Trump Enterprises, which was a management company all over Brooklyn and Queens. And my opinion is he learned to lie from his father, as many people do. And this is not a good look, and it wasn't a good remembrance of Fred Trump. So Trump we'll come to where we know him, but let's start with Fred. In 1973, he was sued by the federal government, listing both him and Donald Trump, on which they signed a consent decree, which is, I give up, you win, I lose. And the consent decree said they could no longer stop people of color from getting apartments in Brooklyn and Queens. The place that was specifically mentioned was Lifrak City. Lifrak City is one of the most important building complexes for people of African descent. And I'm going to say this as honest as I can because of the music. I first knew about Lifrak City before 73, actually, when I was invited to parties there. And the parties had these giant Walkman, boomboxes, maybe 10 or 12 feet high. And they were actually hand-constructed speaker systems that made to look like that. But at those parties, with that blasting music, out in the courtyard and having the fun, that is the origin of hip-hop and rap. Or at least that's what some people say. I'm not an expert of the field, so I just take people's word at it. I was at these parties. They were absolutely the most amazing thing. Well, you know me, I actually got out there and shared and partied hardy with the folks. But I didn't know Queens that well. This was my introduction to Queens, these parties. It's a cultural thing. But Donald Trump's dad and Donald Trump prevented people of African descent from getting these apartments. And unless they really had a slick maneuvers, they didn't get them. The consent decree said that they wouldn't stop people from living in those neighborhoods. Can you imagine Brooklyn and Queens, one of the largest real estate operations? They controlled where African and other minorities lived. And then they lied about it. I can tell you that Woody Guthrie, in the 60s, before he got ALS, included Fred Trump in a protest song discussing this prejudice. When I grew up in a modern town. And my school, which was only a few years old when I started in kindergarten, I think was 4 years old at that point, they announced that they were having an open policy, that any student who fell into the neighborhood, regardless of race, regardless of religion or ethnicity, could come to that school. And so, of the 700 some odd kids in that school, why were they all white? Well, they weren't all white. There were three African Americans in this school that was allegedly about anybody could go there. And the reason for that is there was nobody who would rent them an apartment in my fancy city. There were two neighborhoods they could live, one poor and one truly middle class, but wealthy as compared to other African American neighborhoods. And that was Vauxhall, which started out as a community pre-Revolutionary War, and Washington Heights, which was a suburb that just somehow evolved into a black neighborhood. And that was how things went in my town. With all those changes, I was on the other side of that fight because, as we've talked about before, the town was a birthplace of the American Nazi Bund. And the town was founded by Germanic farmers from Connecticut, called Connecticut Farms originally. And there were places, when I was growing up, in the 60s and 70s, I'm still growing up, but when I lived in Union, New Jersey, that I wasn't supposed to go to. A place called Farcher's Grove, and they played soccer there, and we were told, do not take your bicycle in there, do not hang out there, do not play with those people, just pass it by and wish good thoughts on them. And that was the key. Not wish bad on them, not we're going to get them, they are evil, just may not be safe for you. So think a good thought when you pass that place. And that was how my liberal parents dealt with issues such as that. They didn't go after them. They created peace. And that's what made them both the liberals that they were and the moderates that I understood later in life. As you know, I wasn't always a moderate. I was pretty close to the extreme. But I came from a good family who put me on the right course. And by the time I listened to the lessons and understood them, I got the connection between the music that we listened to. My mother was a big fan of folk music. The music that we listened to, the way we treated people, the way our conversations went, versus the way other people's did. In my neighborhood, there were plenty of people who weren't liberal, who were prejudiced against this group or that group. That goes on. But I'm saying I was raised that way. Donald Trump was raised in a different way. And what we're talking about here is how that affects the way the presidency exists now. Because as we listen to the art of the deal being done and the threats that he and his, how do I say this politely, about cabinet officers, dumbass compatriots, I don't think that was quite polite enough, but I think it was pretty close to accurate. So when I call people like Hitzik and Kennedy dumbass, I mean that in the best way, the friendliest way. I don't hate them. I just don't trust them and don't listen to them. I went for a medical appointment yesterday, and the doctor and I were joking about what I should do. He said, "Do you want a COVID and a flu shot?" I said, "Absolutely. I'm taking every flu shot and every COVID since the pandemic started. I've never caught COVID. In fact, when the fight about masks was going on, I was making masks and giving them out to my friends." So I listened to this. I'm not that far out. On the other hand, Charlie Kirk's predecessor at this not-for-profit that his wife has taken over, he was a COVID denier, and he successfully proved that he was wrong when he died from COVID. Moving right along. So I met Donald Trump in the early 1980s when, accompanied by his ever-present political advisor, Roger Stone, they were trying to figure out how to go after the right wing and be the lift of the right wing, the idea of the MAGA forces. By the time that the Tea Party began to show its ugly Nazi head, they were already making inroads. And the inroads that they made with militias and violent people who attacked our Capitol, people who attacked officers of the law, by the time that happened, Roger Stone had created inroads with these organizations that were unstoppable. This was who marched in Charlottesville. This is who's created this America First. It's not America First. It's not about fentanyl. It's not about crime. It's about authoritarians using excuses to move forward with their political agenda. And that's what we've seen with the MAGA movement. They're not looking to make a better America. They're not looking for me to get along better with my neighbors. They're not looking for my businesses to succeed. They're looking to create an America where they're in charge and they get to say what's going on. You know what? I don't buy that. I never have. I didn't buy it when it was Lyndon Johnson. I didn't buy it when it was Richard Nixon. And I don't buy it when it's Donald Trump, who is the worst of all of them. Some of them deserve more credit than they got. Certainly Johnson. And some of them deserve less credit than they got. Certainly Nixon. That's not to say all Republicans are bad. That's talking about a bad Republican. So just in case you think that I've become a never-Trumper. No, that's not true. I have not become a never-Trumper. I have been a never-Trumper for more than 40 years since I first met him outside of the Howard Stern studio, providing help for my boss. So I'm a guy with history with Donald Trump. And besides that, I was stationed in the Jersey Shore. I was in the United States Coast Guard when Atlantic City approved the gambling. I spent many days there. I think of Atlantic City as one of my homes. And what that's left with, the shell of the Atlantic City after Trump, is abominable. It's shameful. It's just, there's one hotel that's working. All the rest of them are closed or closing, maybe a business here and a business there. The piers are less than a quarter of what they were. The visitors are less and less. And this is the legacy that we've gotten from this Trump family and the way they did business, and the way they do business. And so when we look at this business that the Trumps are in, do we really want to translate those businesses and the way they're run into a country and the way it's run? And the short answer is no. When Elon Musk, the world's richest man, began to cut government waste, which was never government waste, that was a tax on people for their political and social interests. When those attacks began, I clearly stated that it was going to cost Trump billions. And that's exactly what it's done. For a while, he was no longer the richest man in the world. He lost truly close to $10 billion on this effort, where he was claiming to be a good guy, claiming to do something that everybody kind of wanted. Some light trimming on the government side. It's kind of like a haircut. I don't like a big haircut, but a little light trim once in a while do some good. But that's not what happened. They dove in there and attacked for every political reason they could find, and then fired people who didn't need to be fired. And they left the country short of some of its most critical government employees, two of them being TSA and the air traffic controllers. Man, I'm going up in a few weeks to my youngest grandchildren's third birthday. And I'm going up on one of the new routes of the train. I'm going up to Raleigh from my home in Winter Haven by train. It's an overnight run. It's got a 3.5-hour layover in Savannah. Man, I'm going to have some fun. That's a 3.5-hour layover in Savannah at mealtime. I know what to do with this problem. And, I got magazines and telephones to play with. But I'm looking for food. Specifically, the food I'm looking for in Savannah is called gulagichi. And it is made by the first Africans who came to the North American continent. And they lived, many of them, in the Sea Isles from the Florida line north to North Carolina. And they developed their own language. Gula, which is both a people and a language, is a dialect that combines African words with Old English. And you can hear the Old English and the English accents in the word. Is fascinating. Fascinating. We've now finally gone back and looked at it as culinarians and figured out that gulagichi food, the names of the two tribes, or the two groups of people, tribes, is a little more complicated. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but there's certainly peoples. And they were the origins of Southern cooking. They were what we now know as soul food, what we now know as barbecue. All this food came from there, and I'm still looking. Much of the cooking that I have seen from gulagichi is likened to the Brunswick stew, the big stew pots, cooked in a public way. Often, those stew pots were cooked outside of bars. The building of the bar owned by the town, the job of running the bar being one of the civil servant jobs. And it was the only restaurant in town, and the bars had some kind of a stew or a soup. And much of that was our Southern cooking. The South was a big part of it. When the Americans took over Florida in 1821, and in 1817, they took over a small piece of Florida, fort on the Panhandle. But the real taking over of Florida was 1821. Andrew Jackson was the military commander, became the first governor of the state for all that he did. I consider myself aligned with my Seminole brothers and sisters. I try not to use $20 bills because of all that Jackson did. I'm not getting back into it. You got enough Davy Crockett stories for me to know about how I feel about the Indian Removal Act of 1835. Andrew Jackson, many of us do not use $20 bills because we don't like Jackson. And Andrew Jackson claims to be the inventor of populist democracy. But he was an authoritarian who was elected to that position who caused harm to the people of America, some of whom were Native Americans, predating the European. And they were treated horribly, horribly. They were chased from their homes. They were forced to live in places they never could stand. And for those of you who know Florida, and you know the city of St. Augustine, the oldest city in America, they had a fortress there that was there to protect the city from pirates. And so in the 19th century, it was turned into a jail. And the greatest punishment for the Indians of the Southwest and Texas and California, the greatest punishment for them was to ship them off to Florida, where they were really miserable in the heat. There was no air conditioning, no fans, and they sat and sweated miserably in this fortress. This is the America that we speak of. That is not a moderate approach to the native people living in the land, any more than putting a bounty on the heads of the Aborigines in Australia was legitimate, any more than enslaving the Native Americans of South America to mine gold and silver. These are extremist approaches used by authoritarians to make money. And that's where this Trump family seems to be the best. We just heard of a new one from the daughter that's Linda Trump, I think. And she's got a new deal out that's there. The president has taken money for his ballroom. I want to talk about the ballroom a little bit. He's taken money from some of the biggest corporations, and there's no question about it. Just ask Bannon, who got out of jail for doing it. They're stealing a part of it every step of the way. 50 cents for you, $2 for me. 50 cents for you, $2 for me. And this has been the behavior of the Trump family as far back as we can trace it into the 1950s. Now, I ain't saying that before that's what we've got tracings of. And we see the behavior of it is shameful. And the fact that he's got a daughter and a son-in-law that live in a religious community does not mean they behave. It just means they're in a religious community. I've lived in religious communities. In fact, one very similar to that one that they're living on in Miami. I've seen it all, and I want to tell you that some of those people deserve our respect and our love. They are religious figures, and some of those people are members of a religion using it as hiding the bad. Not afraid to recognize the good and the bad. And I'm not saying that all MAGAs are this bad. And really, the question, now that we are in the post-Donald Trump era, what do you mean the post-Donald? Well, I mean, Donald Trump is now in his last years in office. The election is in 28, but it will begin in 27. No question about it. There will be a midterm. Chances are it will be a big push for the Democrats, the Republicans, to counter the push that they knew was coming, especially the Latinos, who will never vote Republican again. Never vote that again. Those Latinos will definitely take away. And so, to contact that, the Republicans began to cheat for a change, and they changed the rules about when you decide where people are separated by, and how do we elect our Congress. And so they made a whole new set of rules and began to cheat. And the corrupt Supreme Court sat there quietly, letting them do it without a problem. Many states had laws against this. They declared all those laws illegal, And too bad, we'll do what we want. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Many people for a long time have said to me, I'm afraid of what's going to happen when Donald Trump has a third term. And I haven't been answering them. So I'm going to give them and you the same answer at the same time. It is my belief, not my participation, my belief as a political observer, as your political observer, as your moderate political observer. It is my belief that when it looks like Donald Trump will actually run for a third time, that violence will begin across America. That is the end of our democracy, and that will cause national violence. And I just want you to know that I believe that many of these militias are going to participate in the violence. I don't think that they're going to align with the government. I think they're going to react against it. And even though they were big fans of this Trump and the Trump family, they've watched what's really gone on. So that's one of the things that will happen. But today, Trump said, I'm just not sure there is a path. And the rest of us are pretty sure there is no path. And the question is there a path to war or not? And we all hope the answer is not. And one of the paths that will lead to war is when the president begins to run for a third time, absolutely against the Constitution. If the Supreme Court allows it, which, as corrupt as they are, wouldn't surprise me, we're going to tear down the Supreme Court. There's a few things we are going to tear down, and that's how it goes. One of them is the ballroom. That stupid ballroom, with all its gold, is going to be torn down within a very short time of Donald Trump leaving office. It's going to be something we all celebrate. We're all going to fill the streets and watch the wrecking ball take down that and try and restore portions of the White House. Donald Trump's ballroom will not last 10 years. Probably won't last 4. Next, Donald Trump's business interests, which are clearly illegal for a president to be involved in. Because of this corrupt Supreme Court, nobody has stopped him. I think we're going to see a lot of Trump chasing. But the good news is, as somebody who observes it, in both his family and the Trump family, I can tell you the other news. Donald Trump's slipping. We can watch him, watch his hands and watch his feet, watch the movement he makes, watch how long he takes to speak. He is beginning to lose it. He will be 83 for the next election. An 83-year-old is not capable of doing things. It just has to be understood that he has periods that he can't. And those periods are getting longer and longer. There was recently an MRI and a visit to the Walter Reed Hospital, which is now being the new secret. Oh my goodness. And we don't know what's going on. But certainly Donald Trump is slipping. He's slipping mentally. He's slipping physically. And he's slipping politically. So stop worrying about Donald Trump. Worry about his policies. Be ready to fight them. But Donald Trump himself is on the way out. I remember as Ronald Reagan began to enter his dotage and the Alzheimer's and his dementia came on so strong that there was no denying it. Right now, they are still able to deny it, but you can't go on for long denying it. Trump is probably sicker than he is admitting. I can't tell you if it's strokes or heart attacks. I suspect that with his diet and with his age and with his schedule and with everything else, we're going to start to see mini strokes, which in all probability was what we saw with Biden. But the difference between Biden and Trump is their families. The Biden family is a respected family, and the Trump family is not by any of their partners any of their cohorts. There are people who want him to do things that can't be done with voting. And so he can only do it authoritarian, and they are big fans of Donald Trump, and that fanhood is going to disappear. And like the French after the Second World War, we were a part of the partisans. I'm glad you're a partisan who fought against Donald Trump, and however you did that or didn't do that, I wish you the best. And but I think that we just have to sit back and watch, because what's going to go on in the future is a different Donald Trump. And once that happens, with his family loose, the question is, how will they act? With his protection and his involvement in the businesses, how they acted was not ethical. How they'll act with Donald Trump gone is a big question. His sons, I don't know Barron that well, but his sons are definitely going to do that. What will come out of the daughters, it's hard to tell. But I think that this is a family, whereas we look at political families like Roosevelt, we have pride in the things that they did, even when they lost. Teddy Roosevelt's Bull Moose Run. Again, we have respect for him and all of that, but he didn't win. Donald Trump, the losing has just begun. And the losing is the hardest part for him. Don't mind me as I pull up some of my notes and we continue on this. So we were talking about how the rest of the country feels about the work that Donald Trump has done, non-political. And you've already heard me rail on, as a member of the Atlantic City community, greater Atlantic City community, that's how they feel. How do New Yorkers feel? Do they feel that they have a better New York since Trump? The answer is no. How about places like Portland and Chicago, where the military came out and attacked civilians for a constitutional right? Right now, the commander of the ICE brigade is waiting to hear his charge on contempt, because after the judge told him no more, I don't care what you're calling it, no more tear gas, no more pepper spray, no more of that, he attacked the crowd personally with tear gas. And so he may be out of our hair now, because he may be in jail. And if the judge doesn't, who knows why, and who knows who paid that off. Yes, you can still buy judges. They're relatively expensive as compared to other politicians, but you can still buy them, and Donald Trump always bragged about his money. And, that the question about Donald Trump is not just his family, it's his associates. And the big one right now is Jeffrey Epstein. And as many of you know, that's another Melania story. It's my belief that Donald Trump's problem with releasing the information about Jeffrey Epstein is the fact that his wife was one of Epstein's girls. And he got her. How did he buy her? Did he make a deal with him? Was there money that exchanged hands for their wife? Is that how things are done in the Trump world? I guess. He's got a wife that he put on the golf course. Who knows what is acceptable in that world? I can tell you many of the things that have gone on from that family are certainly not acceptable. My family would never sell Bibles. That's okay. He doesn't know what they're saying, so man can't read. It was Mary Trump who talked about knowing him when he was in Wharton Business School and that he bought his grades. Again, not surprising, but not an indicator of a smart man who can understand how to assist the economy. I went to a store this past week, as many of you did, and guess what I found? I found inflation. No. I know everything's cheaper now. It's the cheapest it's ever been. Eggs are down. Eggs are down. There's no question. Eggs are only $5 a dozen. It's still a lot of money. That's less than they were. I agree. But it's not a good price. And it's not a way to raise children. So Donald Trump claims to be the master of the art of the deal. And he is the master of the art of the deal if cheating is a part of that. Because Donald Trump cheats on every deal he makes. When he was in Atlantic City, he didn't pay two-thirds of the bills that were put out. He didn't pay, refused to pay. Made settlements and still never paid the settlements to this day. These are part of the reason that I know that tariffs are just a scam. Because if there was so much money, and Donald Trump was correct, that tariffs have created so much money, then the smart move would be take some of that money, put it into healthcare, put it into healthcare, and solve this problem with the government being closed. This is not going to solve by waiting it out. They don't want to solve it. He said it. They've given me the keys to the kingdom. I can do anything I want now. No, you can't. And when you begin going over that line, you endanger your life and your family's life and the lives of the politicians around you. And if you don't think I'm right about this, talk to your Secret Service. Talk to your FBI. Don't go all the way to the top. Kash Patel is not somebody who I would trust. But that is where we are. So his deals, both in New York City with the ice rink and things like that, and Atlantic City, do not show Donald Trump to be an honest businessman. And that's all I'm saying this week, that we're not looking at an honest businessman. But we are looking at a man who is ending his political career. He is going to be out of our hair. So here's what the question that I have for every one of you. After Donald Trump, where do we go from here? What do we begin to do? How do we change it? First of all, we reinstate the money for SNAP, for air traffic controllers, and for a few other minor things. Health care. We're not going to allow $20,000 increases in health care. And the people who will lose from that, without question, will be hospitals, who will be forced to close because they won't have any money to collect. Billions of dollars taken from hospitals all over America. Healthcare in America is about to become bad. And what people are going to begin to do is what they do for cosmetic surgery and dental surgery and other things. They're going to fly down to South America. Stop using the American system. Give up on it. They're going to go down to Brazil and Costa Rica and other places where doctors are working at a fair rate. And that's what the plan is going to be. Is that the right plan for your children? Is that what you think your children should do? Go to a hospital in Mexico City or Costa Rica if they're sick? You want to trust? You're not going to be able to trust any hospitals because the hospitals are going out of business. So what we are doing now is looking at the future without Trump, the future that we have in our hands to bring to our children. So Donald Trump yesterday acknowledged that he would not be able to run again. And that's such a good thing because, as many of you heard me say just before, I believe that if he actually runs for a third term, that political violence will begin in America immediately. Some of it organized, some of it lone wolf, and some of it just because of the sake of guns. Well, there's a line from a song that said sometimes people just shot off their 44 guns to hear the sound that they made. That's the America that MAGA and Donald Trump built. So easy to get guns that's everybody wants to use them. And we all also have to understand Donald Trump is becoming more desperate. And he thinks the answer is to be able to beat up Bibi and force the Israelis into peace. Bibi is a very smart politician. Donald Trump is a lucky politician. He uses mafioso-like threats to try and get us to do something, try and get other people, try and get Norway to give him Greenland, try and get Russia to stop fighting wars of colonialism, it's not going to happen. So in this new era, what are our hopes? For foreign officials, they hope a stable United States. A United States who believes they are the world's policeman, who is doing everything it can to generate peace around the world, not to make money. With federal employees, they just want to see Trump gone. Many of them put their lives and generations into the work that they were doing and had it snatched from them by somebody thinking it was going to help him sell cars. Sell cars. That's, we hear that term and we think to ourselves, he's a used car salesman. That means he's not honest. And yet, could we actually say that about Elon Musk? Yeah. Yeah, we can say that. We can say that because he is doing that. He is acting in a way that isn't honest. His promises for everything from the rockets to Teslas to everything else, just a lie. He made more money in the Boring Company with his not a flamethrower than he did with anything else. And his ideas about family is not the ideas of America. He lives here because his neighbors in Canada or in South Africa or other places he's lived won't find him as amusing. And we now no longer do either. What are farmers going to think of the Trump administration and what they did and who they're doing it to and for? You know the answer to that. They're starving. Farmers are part of who we need to be giving money to for ourselves for the right reasons rather than billionaires. Billionaires can afford enough food. Billionaires are not going to lose their homes and their farms. Our farmers are. And we're giving that money that they need to billionaires who ask for it and give politicians money. And so when we enter the new era of these concentrations, of these actions by the American government, it's going to be a new era. All of these people will vote for that new leadership. They're going to have some phrase. They're going to have some social issues. They're going to definitely, all the same techniques we've been seeing all along. The only thing that hasn't come out yet is what we want, is what we're going to do. It's how we're going to get there. I used to tell my students when I joke about what would happen. So next year, I just got a letter. Bad news is I'm not going to play first base for the Yankees. I'm a bad baseball player. I never could play at a high level. So the fact that I say that, but then I go into a whole discussion. But if I wanted to be in baseball, I would become a marketing assistant in a minor league team, and I'd fill that stadium. I could do it, and then someday, based on my work, they'd call me from the bigs and say, Barry, we need you here at the house that Ruth built for bat night. All those special occasions. I'm a pretty good marketer as those things go. So I'm not afraid of my hitting capability as a marketer. I'm pretty sure that hitting the hard ball up those 90-foot paths, and we're not going to work. But I can fill a stadium. That's for sure. And that's what we're looking for. Not the easy way out, not streets paved with gold, but a pathway to a good life for our people and for our children and for the immigrants we invite in. This country is the better for its immigrants. Trump has been fighting against this since he was lying about where Barack Obama was born. And so we're on a new path, and we're discussing the new path and taking care of our neighbors who are like Mexico and Costa Rica. That's going to be part of our mission. But taking care of our people, that's going to be the biggest part of our mission. And if you want to attack the Democrats for giving away this money and this wealth, well, you go ahead and do it. Because there's people out there today that are starving. And there's a lot more people who are going to be starving tomorrow. And by the end of the week, it's going to be in the middle. And the Republicans, if they had 10 cents extra, would not give it to starving people. They would give it to the billionaires who put them in office. And if that's who you want to be, letting children starve, cutting back on education and health care, to win politically, well, you don't belong in America. That's not an American way. And I'm telling you right now, we don't have Trump to worry about anymore, but we have ourselves and our dreams and the dreams of America that have been promised. My generation was promised an awful lot. We never got any of it. But our mouths are still going. We're still standing where we need to go, and we're still filling the streets. This is Barry Sacro. I thank you. I'm glad you joined me this week. I hope I wasn't too much of a downer or being accused of a never-Trumper, but this is where I stand, and this is what I think. Do something nice. Do something nice for the new America. Say hello to a neighbor. Vote for a new candidate. Work for somebody. Remember, Tuesday is election day. Remember, Tuesday is election day. You need to vote. You need to know who you're voting for, and you need to vote in the right way. Thank you. Thank you for giving me your time and attention. Have a great day. This is Barry Sacro and Pivot Point wishing you the best, and we'll see you next week. Pivot Point out.